The moon was not supposed to be that low. Elion noticed it the moment he stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against his skin like a warning he did not yet understand. The village slept behind him, windows dark, doors shut, the familiar safety of routine sealed away until morning. Yet above the rooftops, the moon hung closer than it ever had before, swollen and luminous, its silver light spilling into the streets as though searching for something it had misplaced. Or someone. Elion had lived his entire life beneath this sky. He knew the way the stars rearranged themselves with the seasons, how the moon waxed and waned like a slow, patient breath. But tonight felt different. The night felt aware. He walked without knowing why. His feet carried him past the old well, across the empty square, and down the narrow path that led to the river. The stones beneath his boots glimmered faintly, reflecting more light than they should have. Shadows stretched longer than their owners, bending toward the water as if drawn by gravity that had nothing to do with the earth. When he reached the riverbank, he stopped. She was there. She stood at the edge of the water, where moonlight shattered into 1,000 trembling reflections. The silver glow brushed her hair, her shoulders, the curve of her face, as though the night itself had chosen her as its center. She did not seem surprised to see him. In fact, she smiled as if she had been waiting. Elion's breath caught painfully in his chest. He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from. Yet something inside him shifted, rearranging itself around her presence as though his heart had always been shaped with this moment in mind. "You're late," she said gently. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly over the water, resonating with a warmth that made his chest ache. Elion hesitated, suddenly aware of how strange this was. "I don't think we've met." She tilted her head, studying him. Moonlight clung to her eyes, turning them into pools of silver and shadow. "No," she agreed, "but you've been walking toward me for a long time." The river stirred at her words, ripples spreading outward though there was no wind. Elion swallowed. "Who are you?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to the water, letting her reflection stretch and break across the surface. When she looked back at him, her expression held something between wonder and sadness. "Tonight," she said, "I am the reason you couldn't stay inside." That should have frightened him. Instead, it felt like truth. He took a cautious step forward. The air around her shimmered faintly, as if light itself were uncertain how to behave in her presence. "My name is Elion," he said, unsure why it suddenly felt important to offer it. The moon brightened, not dramatically, not enough for the world to notice, but enough for him to feel it, like a quiet acknowledgement from something vast and ancient. The girl smiled again. "Good," she said softly. "Now the night knows what to call you." A strange warmth spread through Elion's chest, mingled with a fear he did not yet recognize as love's first warning. He felt seen in a way that went beyond sight, as though every unspoken longing, every quiet hope he had never dared name, had been illuminated. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. For the first time, the moon dimmed slightly. "I don't have one," she said. "Not yet." Elion frowned. "Everyone has a name." "Not everything," she replied. "Some things are written differently." She raised her hand, and the moonlight responded. Silver threads lifted from the river's surface, weaving themselves through the air between them. They did not burn or blind. They glowed softly, tracing symbols that made Elion's heart race even, though he could not understand them. "What is this?" he whispered. "This," she said, "is how love begins when it isn't meant to be quiet." The light brushed his fingers. He gasped, not in pain, but recognition. In that instant, Elion understood something without knowing how. This was not a meeting. It was an arrival, a convergence written long before either of them had been aware of it. The moon hovered low above them, watching. The river held its breath. And somewhere in the fabric of the night, love learned his name, and began to write itself in silver light. Elion did not remember deciding to sit beside her. One moment he stood at the river's edge, heart racing, fingers still tingling from where silver light had brushed his skin. The next, he was seated on the cool stones, close enough to feel the quiet warmth that seemed to surround her, as though the night itself leaned inward to listen. Neither of them spoke. The river flowed on, unhurried, its surface broken by moonlight into trembling fragments that refused to settle. The moon remained low, impossibly present, its glow thick and attentive, like a held breath. Elion became acutely aware of himself, of his uneven breathing, the weight of his hands resting uselessly on his knees, the way his thoughts scattered every time he looked at her. He had the distinct and unsettling sense that something irreversible had already happened. "You're thinking too loudly," she said at last, not unkindly. He startled. Sorry, I didn't realize." She smiled, a small curve of light and shadow. "It's all right. Most people don't notice." Thoughts echo differently at night. Elion let out a quiet laugh, more nerves than humor. You speak as if you belong to it. Her gaze lifted toward the moon. For a moment, she seemed very far away. I do, she said. And I don't. The moonlight shifted, softening around them. Elion followed her gaze upward. It's strange, he murmured. I've watched the moon my entire life. I've never felt like it was, watching back. Her eyes returned to him, sharp and gentle all at once. That's because tonight, it is. A shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of recognition. The idea should have unsettled him. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something he had always suspected but never dared believe. Why me? He asked quietly. She considered the question carefully, as though weighing truth against mercy. You listen, she said finally. Even when you don't realize you're listening. Elion thought of the countless nights he'd spent awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the world felt slightly misaligned, why joy always seemed fleeting, why longing lingered long after it should have faded. He had never known what he was waiting for. Until now. The girl shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The air between them shimmered faintly, the silver threads from before lingering like afterimages. You didn't answer my question, he said softly. About your name. She looked down at her hands. Moonlight cooled in her palms, obedient, patient. I've been called many things, she said. Reflections, wishes, echoes, but none of them fit for long. Elion frowned. Why not? Because names imply permanence, she replied. And I am not permanent. The word landed heavily between them. Elion felt an unexpected ache bloom in his chest. Everyone is temporary, he said, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to argue. That doesn't mean we don't deserve names. She studied him then, really studied him, as though committing the shape of his face to memory. You would give me one? She asked. If you wanted it, he said without hesitation. The moon flared subtly, its light brightening the river's curve. The girl's lips parted slightly, surprised. For a fleeting moment, she looked younger, almost fragile. Be careful, she warned softly. Naming things binds them. I don't mind, Elion replied. The truth of it settled firmly in his chest. I don't think I've ever minded less. Silence stretched again, but it was no longer empty. It hummed with unspoken meaning, with the quiet electricity of something beginning. She leaned back on her hands, gazing up at the sky. The moon wasn't meant to linger tonight, she said. It's already stayed too long. Elion followed her gaze. Is that bad? She nodded slowly. When the moon lingers, it notices things it shouldn't. It remembers. And if it remembers, he pressed. Her voice softened. Then the world changes in small, dangerous ways. As if to prove her point, the water at the river's edge began to glow more brightly, its reflection sharpening until Elion could see not just the moon, but the stars, too many stars, far more than the sky should hold. Elion's breath caught. That's not normal. No, she agreed. It's not. She stood suddenly, the silver glow lifting with her like a veil. Elion rose as well, unwilling to let the distance between them grow. Will you leave? He asked, surprised by the urgency in his voice. She hesitated. For tonight, she said carefully, I can stay. Relief washed through him, swift and powerful. But, she continued, meeting his eyes, you should know this, every moment the moon lingers, it writes something new. And not all writing can be erased. Elion nodded, though he did not fully understand. I don't want this night to end, he admitted. Her smile was tinged with sadness. Neither does the moon. They walked along the riverbank together, not touching, yet intimately aware of each other's presence. The silver light followed them, obedient as breath, illuminating their path while the rest of the world remained dim and distant. Elion told her about the village, about the bakery that smelled of warm bread at dawn, the old bell that rang too early on festival mornings, the way the river flooded every spring and left the fields richer in its wake. She listened intently, as though each detail mattered more than it ever had before. These things, she said softly, this is why the night watches you. He laughed gently. I'm not special. No, she agreed. But you are open. They stopped where the path curved back toward the village. Lanterns glimmered faintly in the distance, unaware of how close the night had come to rewriting them. This is where I stop, she said. Elion felt a pang of disappointment. Will I see you again? The moon pulsed. She stepped closer, close enough now that the silver light wrapped them both in a shared glow. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and placed her hand over his heart. Close your eyes, she whispered. He did. The world fell away. When he opened them again, she was gone. The river flowed normally. The stars returned to their rightful places. The moon had risen higher, distant once more, as though it had never strayed. Yet Elion's chest still glowed faintly beneath her touch. And in the quiet that followed, he understood something with absolute certainty. The moon had lingered too long. And love had noticed. Elion did not sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the wooden beams of his ceiling as moonlight crept through the narrow window, pale and restrained now, as if pretending nothing unusual had happened. Yet his chest still held a warmth that refused to fade, a quiet glow beneath his skin that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He lifted a hand and pressed it over his heart. The warmth responded, not brighter, just aware. Elion closed his eyes, and instantly the river returned to him, the sound of water folding over itself, the scent of damp stone, the way silver light had clung to her hair as if it belonged there. He could still hear her voice, soft but deliberate, as though each word had been chosen long before it was spoken. Naming things binds them. The thought echoed in his mind. He sat up abruptly. What did you do to me? He whispered into the quiet room. The moon did not answer. Morning came slowly, reluctantly. Dawn painted the village in familiar colors, warm stone, pale sky, the promise of routine. Elion moved through his day as though underwater. Faces blurred, voices dulled, even the bread he bought from the baker tasted like memory rather than substance. You look like you've seen a ghost, the baker remarked, sliding a loaf across the counter. Elion forced a smile. Something like that, but ghosts did not leave warmth behind. They did not rewrite the way the world felt. By evening, the pull became unbearable. He returned to the river. The path welcomed him as though it had been waiting, moonlight stretching across the stones ahead of him in a familiar arc. When he reached the bend in the river where they had walked together, his heart stuttered. She was there, not standing this time, but seated on the low wall near the water, her feet bare, toes just brushing the surface. Ripples spread outward from her touch, catching light in shimmering loops. You came back, she said, without turning. Elion laughed softly, relief flooding him. I didn't think I had a choice. She glanced over her shoulder, smiling. That's usually how it begins. He approached slowly, afraid that sudden movement might break whatever fragile rule allowed her to be here. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I know, she said gently. I felt it. He frowned. You felt it? Yes. She turned to face him fully now. Your thoughts are bright. The moonlight shifted, brightening slightly around his head, as if confirming her words. Elion exhaled. That doesn't seem fair. Her expression softened. Love rarely is. The word landed between them, unspoken yet undeniable. He sat beside her, closer this time, their shoulders brushing. A subtle spark traveled through him at the contact, not pain, not shock, but recognition. What are you? He asked quietly. Truly. She did not pull away. I am what happens when longing gathers long enough to take shape. That's not an answer. She smiled. It's the only honest one I have. The river shimmered, responding to the tension between them. Moonlight cooled at their feet, tracing symbols Elion did not understand but felt instinctively, like words in a language older than speech. Do you know what love is? She asked suddenly. Elion blinked. I think so. She shook her head gently. Most people think they do. They confuse it with comfort. Or desire. Or habit. And you? He asked. She reached out, placing 2 fingers lightly against his wrist. His pulse jumped beneath her touch. Love, she said, is recognition across impossible distances. The moon brightened. Elion's breath caught. Then what is this? She met his gaze, silver eyes steady. This is love learning how to speak. The air between them thickened, shimmering as silver threads lifted once more, weaving slowly, deliberately. They did not form symbols. This time, but words. Not written, felt. Every heartbeat sent a pulse of light outward. Every breath pulled the glow closer. Elion felt as though something invisible was being inscribed inside him, line by line, feeling by feeling. This feels dangerous, he whispered. She nodded. It is. Then why are you still here? She leaned closer, her forehead almost touching his. Because some things are worth the danger. For a moment, neither of them moved. The river held still. The moon lingered. Then she pressed her lips gently against his. There was no rush, no hunger, just a soft, inevitable connection that sent silver light surging outward, rippling through the water, climbing the stones, threading the night with quiet brilliance. Elion felt the kiss not just on his lips, but everywhere, behind his eyes, beneath his ribs, deep in his chest where something ancient stirred awake. When she pulled back, her expression had changed. There was fear in her eyes now. We shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Elion swallowed. I don't regret it. She touched his cheek, thumb brushing away a tear he hadn't realized had fallen. You will. The moon dimmed slightly, as though chastened. I can't stay much longer tonight, she said. The more we write, the harder it becomes to erase. I don't want you erased, Elion said fiercely. She smiled sadly. That's the problem. She stood, stepping back toward the water. Moonlight clung to her, reluctant to let go. Tomorrow night, she said. Same place. I'll be here, Elion promised. I know. She stepped into the river. The water did not wet her. It parted, glowing, then closed again as she faded into reflection and light. Elion stood alone beneath the moon, heart racing, chest glowing faintly beneath his skin. Love had spoken, and it had written its first words in silver light. The village noticed the change before Elion did. It began with small things, things easily dismissed. The bell at the chapel rang 1 second too late. Shadows lingered where lantern light had already moved on. Dew clung to windows long after sunrise, shimmering faintly as if moonlight still breathed through it. Elion, meanwhile, carried the night inside him. He moved through the day with the soft ache of anticipation under his ribs, each heartbeat echoing with silver warmth. When he closed his eyes, he could still feel the ghost of her kiss, gentle and terrible in its promise. You will regret it. The words haunted him, not because he believed them, but because he feared what they might cost her. By dusk, the sky deepened into indigo, and the pull returned, stronger now, undeniable. Elion left his home without lighting a candle, trusting the night to guide him. The river greeted him with a hush. She was already there, standing at the water's edge, her reflection tangled with the moon's path across the surface. Tonight, her light was softer, more restrained, as though she wore the glow carefully. You came early, she said. I couldn't wait, Elion admitted. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Waiting is safer. For whom? He asked. For you, she replied. And for the world. He stepped closer. You keep saying things like that. Because they're true. The moon hung higher tonight, but its light felt thinner, stretched, as though drawn too tightly across the sky. I felt something today, she continued. A tremor. Elion frowned. In the river, in everything. She gestured to the water, to the stones, to the distant rooftops barely visible through the trees. When love is written in silver light, the night remembers. And the night has a long memory. Elion's chest tightened. Then why does it let us? She looked at him with quiet intensity. Because the night believes in stories. He let out a small, incredulous laugh. That's not very comforting. It's honest, she said. They walked along the bank, their steps unhurried. Wherever they passed, moonlight lingered a fraction longer, painting their path in faint luminescence. Elion, she said suddenly. The sound of his name from her lips sent a tremor through him. Yes, I never thanked you. For what? For seeing me, she said simply. He stopped walking. She did too. You're not invisible, he said. You never were. Her expression wavered, composure cracking. I am to most. The air between them pulsed, silver threads twitching as if reacting to her emotion. What happens if someone else sees you? Elion asked. Her voice dropped. Then the moon must decide what to keep. A chill ran through him. And what does it usually keep? Balance, she answered. Never happiness. Elion reached for her hand. For a moment, she did not pull away. Her skin was cool, not cold, and light flowed freely between them now, weaving gently, familiarly. I don't want this to hurt you, he said. Her fingers tightened around his. It already does. The moon flickered. A ripple of unease passed through the river, disturbing its glassy calm. She withdrew her hand abruptly. We shouldn't touch tonight. Elion felt the loss immediately, like a sudden absence of sound. Why? Because the night is listening more closely now. As if summoned by her words, footsteps echoed faintly from the path beyond the trees. They both froze. Did you hear that? Elion whispered. She nodded, fear flashing briefly across her face. Someone is close. The moonlight dimmed around her, pulling inward as though trying to hide her shape. A figure emerged between the trees, an old man carrying a lantern, its flame trembling. The watchmaker. Elion recognized him at once. The man rarely left his shop after dark. The old man paused, peering toward the river. His lantern light brushed the stones, skimming dangerously close to where she stood. Elion stepped forward instinctively, blocking the line of sight. Good evening, the watchmaker called, voice thin but steady. Good evening, Elion replied, heart pounding. The watchmaker studied him intently. Strange night, he said. The clocks have stopped again. Elion swallowed. Again. The old man's gaze flicked briefly toward the water, then back to Elion. The moon's been misbehaving. A sharp intake of breath behind Elion told him she understood the danger. Best get home, the watchmaker said, lifting his lantern higher. Some things aren't meant to be remembered. He turned and walked away, footsteps fading slowly. Only when the lantern light disappeared completely did she exhale. He almost saw you, Elion said. Yes, she whispered, and that means others will, too. The moon dimmed further, retreating behind a thin veil of cloud. What do we do? Elion asked. She looked at him, eyes shining with unshed light. We must be careful, or we must be brave. Elion didn't hesitate. I choose brave. Her smile was bittersweet. That choice always has a cost. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently against his, a gesture more intimate than the kiss before. If the night begins to forget, she whispered, promise me you won't. I won't, he said. The silver light flared once more, subtle, restrained, but undeniable. The night watched, and it did not forget. Elion dreamed of clocks that night. Not the gentle ticking of the watchmaker's shop, but vast, floating circles of silver suspended in darkness. Their hands spun without sound, tracing symbols instead of numbers. Each time they completed a rotation, the moon pulsed, slow, patient, alive. He woke with his heart racing. Moonlight spilled across his room, brighter than it should have been, painting the walls in pale silver strokes. For a brief, terrifying moment, he thought she might be standing there, but the room was empty. Yet he was not alone. Something lingered. Elion sat up and pressed his feet to the floor. The warmth in his chest had changed. It no longer merely glowed, it breathed, expanding and contracting as if the silver light had learned rhythm from his own body. Love, he whispered, testing the word. The glow answered. Outside, the village stirred uneasily. Dogs whined without reason. A rooster crowed long before dawn. Somewhere, glass chimed softly, as if touched by invisible fingers. By morning, the rumors had begun. They say the river reflected a second sky last night. I heard the moon stopped moving. The clocks won't keep time. Elion kept his head down as he passed through the square, but he felt it, the way people's eyes lingered, the way shadows leaned toward him just a little too eagerly. The night had not only remembered. It had begun to breathe through the world. At dusk, he returned to the river. She arrived late. When she did, Elion barely recognized her. Her silver glow was dimmer now, thinner, as though stretched by strain. The night clung to her reluctantly, uncertain how much of her it could afford to keep. You're fading, he said immediately. She smiled, tired but sincere. No, I'm anchoring. That doesn't sound better. It isn't. They sat together in silence, listening to the water lap gently against the stones. The moon rose carefully, inch by inch, like a witness afraid of what it might see. The watchmaker remembers, she said at last. Elion's chest tightened. How do you know? Because he repairs what time tries to forget, she replied. People like him hear the night's breathing. Elion frowned. And what happens when people remember you? Her fingers traced idle patterns in the dirt, leaving faint lines of silver that faded slowly. Then I become real. His heart leapt. Isn't that what you want? She looked at him, really looked, and the ache in her eyes made his breath catch. To be real, she said softly, is to be finite. The words settled heavily between them. If I remain what I am, I endure. If I become what you are, she shook her head. I end. Elion reached for her hand without thinking. This time, she did not pull away. The moment their skin touched, the world reacted. The river brightened, its surface lifting slightly as though drawn upward. The moon flared, silver threads bursting outward in all directions. The trees along the bank shuddered, leaves chiming faintly like glass. Elion, she whispered urgently. This is too much. I don't care, he said, though fear crept into his voice. I won't let you disappear. She cupped his face, her touch trembling. You don't understand. Love does not preserve me. It rights me. The silver light surged, pouring from his chest into the space between them. Words formed in the air, beautiful, dangerous words that burned without heat. Names, promises, memories that had not yet happened. She gasped, dropping her hand as though burned. Stop. Elion pulled back, horrified. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. She shook her head. It's not your fault. This is what happens when memory learns to breathe. The moon dimmed abruptly, clouds rushing in as though summoned. Darkness pressed close, thick and uneasy. Footsteps echoed again, closer this time. Lantern. Light flickered through the trees. They're coming, she whispered. Who? Elion asked. Those who remember, she replied. And those who want to. The watchmaker emerged first, lantern held high. Behind him, two others, an old woman with silver hair and a young boy whose eyes reflected too much moonlight. They stopped when they saw Elion. And then they saw her. The world seemed to hold its breath. The old woman crossed herself. The boy stared openly, unafraid. The watchmaker simply nodded, as though confirming a long-held suspicion. So, the watchmaker said quietly. The stories were true. She stepped back, fear naked on her face. Elion. He stood between her and the others without thinking. She's not a story. The watchmaker's gaze softened. No, he agreed. She's a memory that refuses to fade. The moon shuddered overhead. And memories, the old woman murmured, demand a price. The silver light around them thickened, pulsing like a living thing. Elion felt it then, deep in his bones. Love was no longer just written in silver light. It was being read, and once a story is read, it can never be unwritten. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. The river stilled, its surface smooth as glass. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath as the silver light hovered uncertainly between them, too bright to ignore, too fragile to endure scrutiny. She stood behind Elion, fingers gripping the back of his coat as though it were the last solid thing in the world. The watchmaker lowered his lantern slightly. You don't belong entirely to the night anymore, he said to her, voice gentle but grave. She swallowed. I never belonged entirely to anything. That may have been true, the old woman replied, stepping forward, her eyes sharp with knowing. But love leaves fingerprints. The silver light pulsed in response, rippling outward from Elion's chest. The boy tilted his head. She's beautiful, he said simply. The old woman hissed, but the watchmaker raised a hand. Careful, he warned. Names carry weight. Elion felt her fingers tighten against him. What do you want? He demanded. The watchmaker met his gaze. To understand what's changed. The clocks have stopped because time is confused. The moon lingers because it's tethered. And this, he gestured toward the glow. This is new. She stepped forward despite Elion's instinct to shield her. It's my fault, she said quietly. I stayed too long. You stayed because you were invited, the watchmaker corrected. And because you were loved. The word echoed strangely in the night. The old woman nodded. And love demands exchange. Elion's heart hammered. Exchange of what? She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed silver. Of memory. Before Elion could speak, the moon flared sharply, flooding the riverbank with blinding light. When his vision cleared, the silver threads had rearranged themselves into something new, symbols hovering in the air, ancient and deliberate. The watchmaker inhaled sharply. A binding is forming. Elion turned to her in panic. What does that mean? It means, she said softly, the night is deciding how to keep me. The boy stepped closer, eyes wide with wonder. Will she stay? The old woman shook her head. Nothing stays without paying. The symbols rotated slowly, aligning. Elion felt a sudden pressure in his chest, like invisible hands reaching inward. No, he whispered. Take my memory instead. She gasped. Elion, don't. I'll forget, he said desperately. If that's the price, let me forget you. The silver light surged violently. The watchmaker's voice cut through the chaos. That would not save her. Elion looked at him, eyes wild. Then tell me what will. The old woman spoke instead, voice low and firm. One of you must be remembered by the world. The moon shuddered. If she is remembered, the old woman continued, she becomes bound to time. She will age. She will end. And if I am remembered? Elion asked. The old woman hesitated. The watchmaker answered quietly. Then you will become part of the night. Silence crashed over them. She turned to Elion, horror dawning. No, I won't let that happen. Elion met her gaze, fear giving way to resolve. You said love is recognition across impossible distances. Yes, she whispered. Then recognize this, he said. I choose you. The moon pulsed wildly, silver light spiraling upward into the sky. The symbols began to descend, drawn toward Elion like falling stars. She reached for him, tears streaking down her glowing cheeks. I wanted to protect you from this. You didn't, he said softly. You taught me how to stay. The boy stepped back as the light intensified. He's shining. The watchmaker bowed his head. So he is. Elion felt the night opening around him, not as darkness but as vastness. Memories flooded him. Every moon he had ever watched, every quiet longing he had never named, every love story whispered in shadows. The silver symbols pressed into his skin, sinking gently, permanently. The pain was brief. The clarity was not. When the light finally faded, Elion stood very still. The moon returned to its proper place in the sky. The river flowed again. The night exhaled. She stared at him, trembling. Elion. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the moon now, not silver, but deep and endless. I remember you, he said. The old woman closed her eyes. The night has claimed him. The watchmaker spoke softly, and in doing so, released her. She collapsed against Elion, sobbing. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her solid weight, her warmth, human now, fully, irrevocably. I'm here, he whispered. And so are you. She looked up at him, fear and love warring in her eyes. But what are you? Elion smiled gently, sadly. I am what remembers when the world forgets. Above them, the moon shone steady and distant once more. Love had paid its price. And the night had kept its story. Morning arrived gently, as though afraid to disturb what had been rewritten. Elion stood at the riverbank long after the others had gone, the dawn light brushing his face with gold instead of silver. The glow within his chest had changed. It no longer pulsed or flared. It rested, deep, steady, infinite. She slept against his shoulder. Not fading, not shimmering, breathing. Elion watched the slow rise and fall of her chest with a quiet awe that bordered on grief. She was real now in every way that mattered. The night no longer clung to her shape. The moon did not bend toward her. And yet, she was here. You did it, the watchmaker said softly behind him. Elion turned. The old man stood at a respectful distance, lantern unlit for the first time. She's alive, Elion said. The watchmaker nodded. Because you are no longer entirely so. Elion absorbed the words without panic. He felt no fear, only an expansive calm, as though he stood with one foot in a vast, starless ocean. What happens to me now? He asked. The watchmaker studied him carefully. You will not age as others do. You will not be forgotten easily. The night will call to you. Elion looked down at her, sleeping peacefully. And when she wakes, she will remember you, the watchmaker said. But not what you are. Elion's chest tightened. She won't know what I gave up. That, the watchmaker replied gently, is the mercy of it. The sun rose fully, chasing the last traces of silver from the river. When she stirred, Elion felt it, a subtle shift, like a door closing softly behind him. She opened her eyes. For a moment, confusion crossed her face. Then recognition. Elion, she whispered. He smiled. Good morning. She sat up, blinking in the daylight, touching her hands, her face, as though marveling at her own solidity. I dreamed I was light, she said quietly. And then I dreamed I was falling. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You landed. She looked at him closely now, frowning slightly. You look different. Do I? He asked lightly. Yes, she said, like someone standing very far away. He swallowed. I'm still here. She nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. The days that followed unfolded gently, but not without tension. She learned how to exist in the world, how to eat, how to sleep, how to laugh at things that were not beautiful or sad. She chose a name for herself at last, Leora. Light, she said shyly. But not too much. Elion loved her fiercely, quietly. He walked beside her through the village, holding her hand, listening to her marvel at ordinary things, the weight of bread, the warmth of sunlight, the comfort of rain. Yet the night watched him. He felt it in the way shadows lingered near him, in the way moonlight curved subtly when he passed. People sometimes forgot his name mid-sentence. Dogs whined softly when he approached. Children stared with open curiosity. Did they see something strange? Leora asked once. Elion shook his head. They see what they expect. But the watchmaker knew. You are becoming an anchor, the old man said one evening. A keeper. Of what? Of love that crossed the boundary, he replied. The night does not like losing its stories. Elion stood by the river alone that night, the moon reflecting calmly above him. I didn't do this to be remembered, he said aloud. The night answered in a whisper only he could hear. You did it to remember. Elion closed his eyes. He remembered her before she was real. He remembered the silver light. He remembered the cost. And he did not regret it. Behind him, Leora called his name. He turned, smiling, even as the moonlight wrapped gently around his shoulders like an old, familiar cloak. Love had written itself in silver light. And Elion had become the page it could never erase. Time changed its behavior around Elion. Days passed as they always had, yet something in them bent, softened, like fabric worn thin by careful hands. Seasons shifted without urgency. Mornings felt longer. Nights listened more closely. Leora noticed first. You never seem tired, she said one afternoon as they walked through the market. Not truly. Elion smiled. I've always been good at waiting. She studied him, brow furrowed. That's not what I meant. He knew. But some truths could not be shared without unraveling others. Leora was learning how to belong. She laughed easily now, her voice no longer echoing with silver resonance but warm and human. She argued with the baker over prices. She learned the pleasure of rain and the cruelty of thorns. And she learned love, not as longing, but as presence. Yet sometimes, late at night, she would wake with tears on her face. I feel like I forgot something important, she whispered once, clutching his sleeve. Elion held her close. You remembered how to stay, he said gently. That's enough. But the night was not finished. One evening, the watchmaker summoned Elion to his shop. Inside, clocks lined the walls, their faces glowing softly, not ticking, but breathing in unison. The air smelled of oil and old wood and time itself. "You're thinning," the watchmaker said bluntly. Elion nodded. "I know. You cannot live fully in the world and fully in the night forever." "I don't need forever," the watchmaker sighed. "Love always says that." Elion traced a finger along a stopped clock. "What does the night want?" The watchmaker hesitated. "Balance. And if balance is refused, then the night takes what it is owed." A chill passed through Elion. No, the watchmaker said quickly. "Not anymore. The night lost that claim." "Then me." The watchmaker did not answer. That night, the moon rose wrong. Too bright, too close. Silver light spilled across the village, touching rooftops, windows, doorways. People dreamed deeply and woke uneasy. Leora stood at the window, transfixed. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elion stepped behind her, his reflection faint in the glass. "It's calling." "Calling who?" He rested his forehead against hers. "Me." She turned, fear blooming. "What does that mean?" "It means love is being asked to choose again." The ground trembled faintly. The river glowed. Elion felt the pull, stronger than before, insistent. "You can't go," Leora said. "I won't let you." He smiled sadly. "I promised I wouldn't forget." "And what about me?" she asked, voice breaking. "What am I supposed to do if you leave?" He cupped her face, his touch steady. "You live, fully, brightly. You stay." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're talking like goodbye." "Not goodbye," he said softly. "Just distance." Outside, the moon flared. The night had come to collect. Elion stepped back, the silver light rising around him once more. Leora reached for him, but her hands passed through nothing but air and moonlight. "Elion," she cried. "I love you," he said. "That hasn't changed." The silver threads lifted him gently, wrapping him in a familiar, infinite embrace. He felt no pain, only vastness. From the village below, people would later say the moon had paused. Leora collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The light faded, the night closed, and when dawn came, Elion was gone. But love remained, written not in silver light, but in the quiet courage of staying. The village woke to an ordinary morning. That was the cruelest part. Sunlight warmed stone walls. The bakery opened. Children ran through the square. No one spoke of the moon's pause, or the way dreams had clung too tightly to their sleep. Only Leora noticed the shape of the absence. She rose from the floor where she had fallen and moved through the house slowly, touching things as if they might vanish, cups, chairs, the doorframe where Elion had once leaned, smiling. The air still carried his presence, faint as an echo after a bell's toll. "He promised," she whispered to the empty room. "He promised he wouldn't forget." The river called to her that evening. She resisted at first, fear coiling tight in her chest. But longing is patient. It waited until dusk, until the sky softened into colors that reminded her too much of him. At the riverbank, the water flowed normally. No silver, no shimmer, just reflection. She sat where they had once sat together and pressed her palm into the cool stone. "Come back," she said, feeling foolish and desperate. "Please." The water did not answer. Behind her, a soft footstep. The watchmaker stood at the edge of the path, hands folded behind his back. "He's not gone," he said gently. Leora turned sharply. "You said he would be taken." "Yes," the watchmaker replied. "But not erased." She stood, hope flaring painfully. "Where is he?" The watchmaker sighed. "Everywhere the night remembers love." "That's not a place," she said angrily. "No," he agreed. "It's a responsibility." She stared at the river. "Then what am I supposed to do?" The watchmaker met her gaze. "Remember him." "I already do," she snapped. "Not with grief," he said softly. "With purpose." The moon rose quietly overhead, distant and indifferent. That night, Leora dreamed. She stood in a vast dark sky, stars drifting slowly like embers. Elion stood far away, his form faint but unmistakable. "Can you hear me?" she called. He turned. The distance between them did not close, but it softened. "I'm here," he said. She ran, but the ground stretched endlessly beneath her feet. "Why did you leave me?" "I didn't leave," he replied. "I stayed where love needs watching." She reached out. Her fingers brushed light. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "But fear doesn't undo what we wrote." She woke with tears on her cheeks and warmth in her chest, not silver but steady. From that day on, Leora began to change. She started walking the village at night, listening. She learned where moonlight pulled and where it recoiled. She noticed whose dreams were heavy and whose hearts were too quiet. People began to seek her out. "You have a calming presence," they told her. She smiled politely, never explaining. At the watchmaker's shop, the clocks began to tick again, slowly, carefully, as if relearning how. The night is settling, the watchmaker said. Because someone is remembering properly. Leora returned to the river one final time before winter. She stood beneath the moon and spoke clearly. I am not asking you to give him back, she said. I am asking you to let me walk where he watches. The moon did not answer. But the water shimmered, just slightly. And far above, unseen by all but the night itself, Elion felt it. Love had not faded, it had learned to endure distance. And distance, too, had learned to listen. Winter arrived quietly, blanketing the village in frost and silence. But the nights carried a weight Leora could not shake. Every evening, she would walk to the river, hoping, expecting, yet never seeing him in the flesh. And every evening, she felt him, somewhere beyond reach, his presence lingering like a faint heartbeat in the air. She pressed her palm to the cold stone where he had once sat. The silver warmth was gone, yet an emptiness hummed beneath her fingers, a silent echo of what had been. This isn't living, she whispered into the night. Her voice scattered like feathers on the wind. Not without him. The river responded as if listening, though the water flowed in perfect rhythm, undisturbed by her plea. Leora sensed the night itself had shifted. It no longer watched her with tenderness. Instead, it held its breath, tense, expectant. It was as though the very air was aware that something crucial had changed, and that the world had been split in two, one half inhabited by the ordinary, the other by love and its price. She turned at a sudden rustle behind her. The watchmaker emerged from the shadows, his lantern casting long lines across the frozen ground. They've noticed, he said softly. Leora frowned. Who? Those who see things that shouldn't be, he replied. The world doesn't like halves. And you've created one. She took a step back. I don't understand. The old man motioned to the moon, which hung impossibly bright above the river. Its light was no longer constant, it flickered like a candle in the wind. When love crosses the boundary between human and night, it leaves a fracture. One side belongs to you. The other belongs to him. And the fracture, if ignored, will grow. Leora's chest tightened. What do I do? You must choose, he said. Either you call him back into your world entirely, and the balance shifts. Or you stay here, and the fracture widens until something has to break. The words felt like ice in her veins. And if I call him back? She asked, voice trembling. He will be here, but not as he was, the watchmaker warned. Every moment you reclaim changes him. He may no longer be yours in the way you remember. Leora's eyes filled with tears. And if I don't, then the night takes its due, he said. It always does. But the cost may fall on you. She staggered forward to the river, heart racing. The water shimmered faintly, silver threads faintly lifting as if recalling the moments they had shared. She saw a reflection, him, but it rippled and wavered, distant, unreachable. I don't want to lose him, she whispered. You already have, the watchmaker said quietly. But not in the way that matters. You've learned to see him across the divide. That is the start of endurance. The wind rose suddenly, cold and biting. Silver snowflakes swirled, though the moon above had not yet moved. Leora held her hands together, trying to will the light to return, to call him here. The fracture pulsed through the night. A voice, his voice, faint and distant, reached her ears. Leora, her knees buckled. Elion, do not call me fully. The cost is too high. Tears spilled freely now, freezing on her cheeks. She reached toward the reflection in the water, desperate to bridge the impossible distance. The moon pulsed in answer, casting a silver glow that split the night itself, dividing the world into two halves, one touched by love, one untouched, one waiting for reunion, the other bracing for absence. Leora fell to the stone, whispering, I don't know how to choose. The watchmaker knelt beside her, gently pressing a hand to her shoulder. Love does not always give the comfort of choice. Sometimes it gives only courage. And in the silence that followed, the river shimmered faintly, the moon lingered unnaturally, and Leora realized the truth. Love had arrived fully in her life, but at the cost of splitting reality itself. The fracture existed, and she, and only she, had to navigate its perilous path. She looked up at the moon and whispered, I will find you, even if the night has to bend for me. The air shivered, and somewhere far away, across the fracture she had created, Elion felt her words echo. Love, it seemed, could not be contained by distance. And the night was watching.